All right. Quick sound check. Can you hear me all right there in Calgary? Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. What kind of name is that? Gurgly. Nice. All right. Okay, we can start. They can hear me. They can hear me in Calgary, and you can hear me here. So we'll talk about Node.js applications today. So where are we so far? We've done requests with HTTP with the request library so far. Have we done that today? Have you done some requests using the request library? Yes? Okay, cool. So we hit that point. Okay, so we're going to use that today in our Node application. We're going to try and learn a little bit about what we'll call the environment. So the environment's where this Node application is running on this machine or that machine or that machine. All of these could be configured as different environments. We'll have to learn a little bit about that and how we can actually protect potentially our secret keys and our tokens and stuff from maybe people finding them and using them for bad things. So let's go over this. This is the environment. Environment is for lack of a better word, I guess the environment is the configuration of the location that the application is running in. So when I have my command line here, right? This is, you all have this, and I can see what my current environment is configured as, and usually this is just variables being set to certain things with the export command. When I type export, it gives me back a list of all of the variables that I have defined inside my environment. And these variables are accessible from within my Node application. Okay. So what are some of the things in here? For example, the path is an environment variable. This whole thing here is a list of directories that my operating system should search in when I'm trying to execute a command. Anytime I type in a command, it's going to look for that executable in one of these directories that's listed here. If the executable I'm trying to run is not in one of these directories, then I will get a command not found back. Okay. So I can modify my environment to add new directories into this path, and then when I do that, it'll behave differently. So there's a lot of stuff going on in here. My home directory, Java home, a whole bunch of stuff just gets kind of slammed in here. It's like a bunch of global variables for my environment. All right. So why is this important? If I have this environment that I'm running my application in, then I have the ability to separate my code from my configuration. And this isn't going to be immediately apparent why this is useful to you, because it's still just week 2. But week 4, we start connecting to databases. So let's think about a situation where you actually have 3 people working on the same project, and each of them has a different database on their machine. Right? And that's okay. This is how we do it. We run a database here. I run my app. It connects to my database. Someone else runs the same app on their computer. It connects to their database instead. Right? Now, can you imagine if every one of those developers had to actually change the location of that database, the password, the login, the name of the database every single time they wanted to actually connect to that database? You'd actually go change the code, put your information in there, commit that, push that up to GitHub, and then the next person, when they pull that change, they don't have to change it to their information. So we don't want to keep that information in code, because in order to change it, as we move this application between different environments, we actually have to modify the code. So what we want to do is keep some stuff in configuration and use the code to read that configuration and pull the value out for the environment. Okay, so where does this come from? 12-factor app. I'll show this to you quickly. And the 12-factor app has sort of 12 rules to building web applications these days. You don't need to learn all this or remember all this right now, but look, this is where this comes from. In the config, one of the rules to building a good web application these days is that we store our configuration in the environment. Okay. And there's a whole bunch of different stuff. Let's say that I am uploading images to an Amazon S3 bucket. Maybe you don't necessarily know what that means, but Amazon gives us the ability to upload a file to their server, and then they will serve that file for us. So for example, let's say we have a website, someone creates a profile, they upload their user profile image, it gets saved, pushed onto Amazon's S3. When someone else loads up that site, it'll grab that image from Amazon and serve it to them so they could see that user's image. Now, I might want to use a different S3 server depending on if I'm in development mode or if I'm in production mode. And so through the configuration, I can decide if I'm in development mode, connect to this S3, whereas if I'm in another mode, production mode, connect to another S3. So I get to switch these things. I could use different databases, different URLs, different ports even if I want to, right? So I can configure all this through the environment. But this is where we're really getting to today, and this is why it's important for you today to learn about these environment variables, is because we do not want to store keys, tokens, passwords in our code, right? Does that make sense? We don't commit these things to GitHub, right? Because then people can see them. So let's go through, I guess, the ways that we could do this. With GitHub, for example here, I've got this example. I'm not going to go through the GitHub example too much because you're going to be doing a lot with GitHub. So this is where this is where most of your activity is. I'm just going to show you sort of how can we make it so that this GitHub token is not included in our application, right? Because it is a requirement. If I delete this and I run this application, which does a GET request to get all the repos, it takes those repos, parses the data, loops through each one, prints out the name of the repo, and then at the end, how many repos there were. It's quite simple. But if we run it, this is what we get, a list of all the repos, and then the number of repos. This is just for my GitHub account. Now, when I make this request, oops, curl -v. When I make this request, oh wow, that's not going to be easy to read. I'll do this. Okay. This is the problem. When I do not have the token and I make a request to GitHub, then I have only 60 requests per hour available to me. But by using a token and sending the token along in my request, I can increase this to like 5,000 an hour, and just for me, just for my token. Whereas this is 60 for all of you shared on this IP address, right? When one of you makes a request to GitHub without an access token, GitHub says, oh, well, no access token. We're going to limit you to 60 for this IP address. Someone else makes another request. Now you're down to 58 and then 57. How many times could you test this application, the group of you, before you run out of requests, right? So we add this access token, and then that should increase the amount of requests we can make. And we can just do that by, I think, access token right on the end of it here. And I need to find this access token that I want to use for this request. So we have to go to GitHub. I guess I'll just go to any of the repos. And my settings. And then inside, I think it's developer settings, personal access tokens. Create a new token. Ooh, anybody? So this is just for a demo. I'm just going to name this token. And I'm not going to scope it to anything. This scoping is useful because when I create this token, I potentially could open up all of the access on my account with this token. But the scoping allows me to create a token that has limited access if I want to. So I can say that this only allows access to gists by clicking this. But in this case, I'm going to have it get access to everything because I'm just showing you an example, and I'm going to delete this thing after anyways. So I generate my token. Here it is. I should be able just to attach this to the end here, make my request, and, well, it didn't like the, it got a not found, but it had no problem with that token. It liked that token, and it upped my number of requests to 5,000, right? So this is what we have to do now for our application. And for me to go in here and just paste this, that's the anti-pattern, right? Oops. Copy that again. For us just to paste this, becomes very dangerous. Okay, so how do I make this process? So process, this is something built into Node, process.env, process.argv, right? You've used this already, I think, right? Yeah, so argv is something that allowed you to gain access to the arguments that were passed to this program. Process.env is another object on this on this project object, a process object, that stores all of our environment variables that we want access to. I guess what I should do first is I can just console log process.env. So here they are. These are all my environment variables, and they should look familiar, including the path that I showed you when I did an export. So they should all be there. And there's actually some more here, some other secret keys that got included that aren't actually a part of my exported one. So I'll show where those come from, because that's actually sort of the goal here. So process.env holds all these variables. The question is, how do I get this GitHub token into my process, my environment? I'm going to take this string, and the first way I can do it is by creating an environment variable called GitHub token, giving it a value, and immediately running my application. So this is going to set the environment variable just for the life cycle of this app, and then it won't be in the environment anymore. Okay. And make sure that this is back to here. There we go. All right. So, you know, that worked. And if I make a mistake here, let's see what happens if I, well, it doesn't like that very much. So obviously, obviously this token that I passed in, oops, is just fine. I didn't get an error back. I got the results that I expected back. So now I can set this every time. It doesn't make sense for me to set this every time. That means I need to keep track of this string here. So another way we could do this is with, I believe it's just set. It's just, yeah. So I can say export GitHub token is equal to, oh damn, that was a mistake. Well. So now what I'm doing is I'm actually just setting the variable in my environment. And when I do it this way, and I do export now, we should see that this actually is now set in my environment variable. Okay? Now, if I open up another terminal and I hit type export, that's not here. It's over in this terminal, because I set it in this terminal, but it's not in this terminal. So environment variables don't necessarily stick around forever. Right? This is a problem we kind of want to solve, is that we want to keep a reference to this variable. We don't have to think about it anymore, and we don't have to set it every time we open up a new terminal. So the third way that we're going to do this is through this tool called .env. Okay, this is just an npm package that will, it's a package we'll install from npm, and what it lets us do is take a file like this and define our variables in it. Each variable will have a new line. If I want to define what my port would be, I want to define anything else in here, I can put that value in here. So any of these things I want these to be loaded as my process.env.github token, process.env.port, process.env.anything else. These would all be available. It's not an env.github.example. This is just an example of the file. The file we'd actually be modifying is the .env file. So that's what I'm going to put in here. Now, my GitHub program, what it does the very first thing that it does is actually load this .env program up. It calls config on it. So this is require.env. It imports that module. That module has a function called config. And when config is called, what it will do is load up a .env file. It'll read each line, and it'll insert these variables into the environment for you. So that when you try and access it through process.env, it's available. Okay. So first thing we do is we define the variable or variables we want in our .env file. Then in our script, as early as we can, we load the .env file using the .env library. And then anywhere in our Node application, we can use process.env and then the name of that variable to gain access to that value again. Does this kind of make sense? So this is how we hide our private keys from the public. And when you go and work on your project together and you need a token, each of you will generate your own token. Each of you will have your own .env file in your own direct root of your own project directory, and no one will commit this file. Right? Everyone will have a copy of .env. Each one will have its own key in it, and everyone's software will use the configured key to connect to GitHub or whatever it is instead. Does this make sense? Okay. So don't commit your .env file. That's where all your secrets are. Make sure it gets added to .getignore. So any questions about the environment stuff before I go into an example? Okay. So the example I want to work on today, it's actually, it's pretty complex. I tried to come up with something complex, something that actually has requests that depend on each other. So there's 2 requests that are going to be made. In order to get the data that we need to make the second request, though, we have to complete the first request. So we have to chain these things. And what this app does, I'll just run it for you first. Oh, that's gross. Let's see what happened. Oh, I know what it is. Of course, I have to set up my tokens now for these services that I'm using here. And I delete them after every lecture because I don't even remember what this one is. Oh, this is gonna be embarrassing. Oh, I did it. Okay. So most of these services, this is just one of the 3 that I found that would pretty much do what I wanted, but I liked their API. And they give you a free account, and you can do up to 1,000 free calls per day, so that's good enough for a demo. Here's what the API call looks like. I make the request to this host, and then the path is /forecast, and then it looks like an API key, and then some coordinates, some latitude and longitude coordinates for where we want that weather forecast. Okay, and if we go into the docs here, we can see a few things. So, for example, part of the rules for using this is that I'm required to display the message powered by dark sky, and it must link to this darksky.net powered by location somewhere prominent in your app or service. If this doesn't work for me, then I need to email sales@darksky to be compliant. But this is when we're using APIs that other people provide, there are sort of terms of service. There are sort of guidelines that they might provide for you. So kind of have to read this, figure out what they need, and I'm gonna satisfy this requirement in my app by just there we go. That's all they asked of me, is just to make sure that this was visible to you all while I used this thing, right? Okay, so let's put the key in here. I'm going to reset the key, grab that. This goes into my .env file, and it's going to be the darksky_sk variable. So that's going to be process.env.darksky secret key. And in my application, that should be right here. That's where it's using it when it tries to make that request. And this This URL looks formatted similar to what I kind of described before. Excuse me, where the path is /forecast / the key / the latitude and longitude for where we want to get the weather for. So in order for me to get weather in the first place, I need to figure out where the user is. I need to know where their latitude and longitude is. So before I do a request to dark sky, I'll do a request to a service called IP stack. Okay? IP stack. Free IP geolocation API. So this allows me to provide an IP address. I get back a location. This is what the data looks like when it comes back, including a latitude and longitude. This is what I'm after. This happens to be, I think, my IP address here. 162.245. Yep. So it figured out what my IP address is. It knows because I made the request to the server in the first place, so it has that information. I actually have 3 ways I could do this. But let me get my access key first. Oops. Log in. Yeah. Okay. So I'm reset this key. Got a new one now. And I want to put this into here under IP stack SK. So this is my IP stack secret key. Now when I make a request to IP stack, it's going to pass in the access key from my environment, not from the code. Okay. And so IP stack has a few different requests that I can make. I like endpoints. That's like another way for API path, I guess. So these endpoints are paths that I can call. The standard lookup says that I call IP stack, provide an IP address, and as long as I have my access key, I will get back an object that looks like this, which includes my latitude and longitude. But I don't know the IP address of who I'm actually. I don't necessarily want to have to look up my IP address just to get the weather. I wanted to figure out what my IP address is when I make the request. So standard lookup isn't going to work for me because I have to provide it. Bulk lookup also isn't going to work because that's just a list of IP addresses. Okay, so their API allows this the ability to pass multiple IP addresses, and I will get back an array of objects. Each one has a latitude and longitude. But that's still not what I'm after because I only need one location here. So look at the third thing here, which is the requester lookup. And the requester says, IP stack offers a separate API capable of detecting the IP address which the current API request is coming from. So when my machine makes a request, the service figures out who I am, and it just sends me back the data for my location. So I'm using the /check path. So it should figure out who I am, figure out what my IP address is. And when I get the IP address, it's going to print out Vancouver, BC, and then call retrieve weather, passing in the latitude and longitude, which is going to call dark sky with the latitude and longitude, and then it's going to take that and it's going to print out formatted nicely. So let me just show you what that looks like. Okay. Ooh, gross. Let me just fix that quickly. Try one more tab, right? Always one more. No, no more. I don't know. Whatever. I'll leave it. So this is the output that we get. Right, I've got my little legal confirmation or my little legal disclaimer up there, and then it makes the request to get the latitude and longitude. Once it's done that, it can make the request to get the weather, and then once it's done that, it can format it in this way, which is just a list of the next week's worth of weather. I'm just getting all the weather for the next few days and getting the average. Looks like yeah, it's going to get pretty warm, huh? Okay. Pretty consistent weather. Usually this is more interesting because there's rain and fog and all that stuff in there as well, but it's all sun and cloud coming. Okay, let's start by building this up from scratch. I don't want that. And I'm going to get rid of this. Okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna write this up again. I kept a few things here. One, I wanted to keep this because there's no point in me rewriting this. This is just loading up that .env file so that all my keys are put into the environment while this application is running. Make them available. Requests, that's the request library rather than HTTP. I'm going to use that nicer request library so I don't have to like combine all the chunks and stuff when I download my data and my requests. Moment is going to be a tool that we use for displaying and formatting the dates. You saw there I had these dates here. So I want to display and format those. But when I look at what I get back from Dark Sky under the docs, they give me back like this number here. It's not a formatted date. It's a timestamp. So I'm going to use moment to convert this timestamp into a date that says, I don't know, like Monday, May 6th or something like that. Cool? Okay. This thing here is a table I created because I like to have these little emojis. So we saw the emojis right here. But the API that when it sends data back, it doesn't send emojis back. It doesn't send an emoji that represents the sun. What it does instead is it passes something called an icon. And so the icon could have the value of rain. It could also have the value of, wow, let's see, icon. Snow, partly cloudy night. Those are other options. So what it is, I just went through all those options. I created a list of them because these are just the icons. And I mapped them to an emoji that represented the same kind of an idea, right? So if I want to get the sun emoji, I can do a lookup into my object. Right? That gives me back a sun emoji. Okay? Now, if I get my icon from the API, and they say, well, this is a clear day, then all I need to do is take my weather lookup, pass the icon to it, it'll give me back, it'll convert it into an emoji for me. So that's what that's there for. I don't want to have to write this again, so I'm just going to keep this table here, okay? The rest of it was just, I wanted to make sure here that I just didn't have to look this up again. This is the URL that I'll make the second request to, but the first request, oh no, it's okay. I've got history. The first request looks like this. All right. So my first request, when I use the request library, I have to pass a callback function. And this receives back an error, the response, and the body of that response, right? Okay. So I could console.log response.status code. See what that does. 200. So everything's okay. Let me also just making I should come up with a shortcut for this. There we go. I just want to be able to see the questions if there are any. There we go. Oh, is there an extension for showing emoji in your IDE? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that means. Gurg. Is Gurg short for something? Oh yeah, it's short for gurgling hashes. What is this word? Has anyone seen this? Yeah, I'm not sure. Extension for showing emoji in my ID. I mean, I have this. Oh, I see. Like these. Oh, I see. Why is the pictures in my code? I mean, yeah, these are just emojis. I can just copy and paste these in my code. I can use them. I can even. These end up being. Oh no, that one's not. Should be. Should be. Let's see. No, it doesn't like that one. I have seen, some of them seem to be okay though. I don't know what's going on there. I've definitely seen people use... I'm not sure what environment it would be in then. Let's try this. No. Oh, wow, that's even different. Oh, wow. That's not even what I did. Okay, I don't know what's going on there. I'll figure it out. Gurgly, okay. Amazing. Okay. So yeah, that's why they're pictures in my code, is because I actually just place these. These are just string value, emoji string values. And I think I just copied these from like, I don't know, like some emoji reference chart or something like that. Yeah, I think I just copied it from here. And then pasted it into my editor. Okay, so yeah, no extension necessary. All right, let's get back to this. I'm now making this request. I get the status code back. Let's see what comes in the body of this request, or the response. Okay. So this is the response that came back from IP stack. It's nicer if I load this up into a file here. I can prettify it and see. So that actually did require an extension, just so anyone's clear. This one called prettify JSON. So I ran that on my JSON because it was all a single line, and it's set up. Oh, it looks like they do the country emojis though. That's kind of cool. So this is actually the structure of the data that's coming back from IP stack. It includes my IP address, the city that I'm from, and the region code, which happens to be the province, except they can't call it province because everywhere, I mean, it's different everywhere we go. So they've just tried to generalize this as a region, and that's where we get BC from. So I need to be able to take the name, or the city and the region, and print that out. That's my first step. So I need to convert this into an actual JavaScript object. This is just the notation. So I need to parse this. And now data should have a city and a region code. And so that's how I get Vancouver, BC out of it. So maybe I want to format that nicely and say location Vancouver plus BC. Okay. So this is the location that we're going to grab the weather for now. This was the dependency. We need to finish this request before we got the data.latitude. I think it's just, yeah, latitude is here. So data.latitude and data.longitude. That's right, yeah, longitude. So these two values are what I'll use to make my next request. That is why I had this function up here. Right? I can call this retrieve weather function. I can pass in the latitude and longitude. It will grab the key for me out of my environment and then make the request to get the data for that. And then I will get the callback here. Oops. And it's the same structure because it's still just a request. I get an error, a response, and the body. And I can log that body here. Okay, so when I'm completed the IP request, I call retrieve weather, I grab the latitude and the longitude, I pass those two in, and now it should make the request over here to retrieve the weather. So let's see how that looks. I'm going to run this in the debugger. Why did it stop there? Okay, I'm not sure why that's not working. I'll have to look that up. I just wanted to be able to jump between functions, but if we can't do that, that's just going to be more confusing. So here, I'm going to call retrieve weather, pass latitude and longitude. I should get the output here. And this is going to be a big object, I think. Oh, what's going on here? Maybe I should put some error handling in, because then it might tell me if something's wrong, right? Is there an error here? No. I'm not sure what's going on here. Just gonna time out, or okay. Well, let's figure out how to debug this, right? Because I'm trying to make this first request, but I'm not getting back what I need, and so when I try and do the second request, it looks like I'm getting an error back for that. Now, okay, let's try doing this query again using Karl, and we can add the access key onto the end of it. I just need to grab that out of my env here. Huh. Wow, that was really... That's just really long. That's just taking a long time for some reason. That is not good. All right. Okay, I'm just pinging. We got a pretty good connection. We can see it's like 24 milliseconds between. But for some reason, when I make the request, they're taking quite a while to come back with the information. So what I'll do is I will just take this right now, just to make sure we can get through the rest of this. I'm going to just kind of skip this part here. And I'm going to call retrieve weather just directly with the latitude and longitude. So I also need the longitude. Yeah, that's weird. I've never run into that before where it took so long. Okay. That's better. Now it's actually, now we're not getting that hindered by that that IP stat call. So the good news is it worked for us a little bit, right? So we got to see what this dependency is. I probably want to print out this location as well. Here, we'll do that, and we'll just say. Okay, so we'll just fake it. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes things like this happen, and you just have to figure out a way to get around it until it works again, and then come back to it, right? So this is something I have to do often, where maybe your API server's down for the afternoon or something. They're going to do a database upgrade or something like that, and you knew it ahead of time. So now what you need to do is kind of come up with start up your own server that you can connect to in the meantime, or you just need to hard code data, or you need to load up JSON directly. All these things we can do to just make it work for now, and then eventually we go hook it back up. Because if we figure out, if we know eventually we're going to want to grab data in this format from this server, then we can just pretend we downloaded it use it, and then eventually replace it with the real data, and usually that integration works out pretty well. So that's what we're doing here. We'll skip that part of it, just pass in my location directly, and come back to here to finish this off. So this is the body. There's a lot of stuff going on in here. I'm not going to try and read this right now. I think the best thing to do for that is to actually go back to the dark sky documentation and take a look at what their objects look like. So this request contains, or this response contains information about the latitude and longitude, the time zone for where we actually are getting the weather from. And then it's broken down in here into hourly. So the next, I don't know, 24 hours it might be. Then they've got daily. So that would be the next maybe 7 or 8 days. And they've got, I think it's just hourly, daily, and currently or something like that. Yeah, currently, minutely, hourly, daily are the options that they have. The one we care about is daily, though. Because if we're going to show the weather for the next week, then what we would do is we'd grab the daily weather, which is going to have an array in it of data, and each of the items in this array is going to represent 1 day's worth of weather. So as we go through this, then you get another object will be the second day, third object, etc. So we're going to grab 6 or 7 of these objects, iterate over them, and print out the data for them. So if this is under daily data, I need to grab that. First, I'll parse the body, make sure that that data is available to us, that we can actually access it as an object. Then I will console log body dot data, I believe. Body dot daily dot data. And when I print this out, no, it's not. Okay, what's body again? Body has currently, it has minutely, expected to have daily. Body.daily. Is it body.data.daily? Should be. So. Oh, I see what you're saying. No, it's, yeah, you're right. You were right. I was totally wrong. That's what it was. It's not the body, it's the day. Perfect. Okay, there it is. So this is now the daily, and the daily doesn't include the data we want because the daily is the daily contains the summary, the icon, and the data that we want. So we need to jump in this a little bit deeper. We'll do data, which is our parsed body, daily, which is the sub block that we want, and then we want the data from daily. So this should actually be now an array, and it is, because I can see that here. I can see this is an array because it ends with one of these square brackets, and it's an array of day weather objects. Right. Here's the first day, all the way down, etc. So if I wanted to, I could grab these out. I'm going to say, like slice 3 or something like that. That gives me 3 days worth of data. 1, 2, 3. Actually, oh no, why is it? Slice. That's right. Thank you. It's better. 1, 2, 3. And so what I really want is like the next week's worth of data. So I'd grab that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So I need to now take this, iterate over it, and for each day in the week, I want to print out let's just start with the date. We'll start with this. So this is what I get back when I try and print out the, I said date, but the way that this is represented is actually by time. And time is a Unix timestamp. Oh, Unix timestamp, there we go. So this is a Unix time, and that means that it's the number of seconds since January 1st, 1970. Cool? It's just the date they chose, but January 1st, 1970, this is the number of seconds. So what I want to do is take this and convert it into a formatted string. So I need this moment library that I said we would use. Moment.js. And moment.js allows us to create a moment object and then call the format method on that moment object to get a format that matches some sorted predetermined format. Okay? So let's start building this up. I'm going to start by I'll take this time and I'll pass it to moment so that it uses this time to create the date object for me. And then I'll format it. And in the format, I need to define sort of what sort of formatting I want. Let me just go with this for now. This is going to be, it says here that 4Ms stands for the, where's my docs? Here we go. 4Ms, if I format, 4Ms, the output would be the long form month name. And if I used 3Ms, then I'd get the shortened version instead. And if I used, well, the capital M, what I'd get is actually a number that represents the month. So I can use all these formatting flags to decide to a great granularity what I want this string to actually look like. For now, this is going to be the full month. This is going to be DO, which is the day of the month, but with a suffix added on, like a ND or a TH or something like that. That's being done for us automatically. That's quite nice. I don't have to think about that. That's one of the benefits to using a library like this, is I'm not having to think of it as the first or as the second. So DO does that for us. And then here, the year, that's going to be the full year with four digits. So what does it actually look like when we print it out? Okay. That doesn't look right. There's a little clue into here what's going on. When did I say that number started? Yeah, 1970. We see 1970 here, and it was January 1st, 1970. And this is about 18 days later. So what's happened is this number that I'm passing into this, it's taking this number and it's trying to convert this into a date. But Moment has a different plan for us. Let me just figure out exactly where it is. When I pass Moment a string, or a number, let's see. Here we go. This is what I did, right? I called Moment and I passed it the number that I got from the API. And this says that it accepts a Unix timestamp in milliseconds. Right? But my API doesn't do milliseconds, right? My API does seconds. So this is why I've got that wrong date, is that I didn't pay enough attention to what the API is returning me, and I just tried to use this with this library that expects a different thing. I've got two options here. The simple option is to convert this to milliseconds and then pass milliseconds in, right? So if I do this, that looks a lot better, because those look like the dates following today. And another option, if I dig even a bit deeper, is that I can actually use Moment with this other function instead, and this accepts seconds instead of milliseconds. So maybe instead of multiplying by 1,000, which either way, I'm happy with. Oops. This should give us the same result, because now it's going to just probably internally it just multiplies it by 1,000. I bet that's what the code does anyways. But that's why we're getting the wrong value. So we need to be careful when we're dealing with dates and times. Libraries like Moment make it a lot easier to format things, but we do still need to play nicely with them. So keep that in mind. Maybe your timestamp's seconds, maybe it's milliseconds. Those are very different things. And now do we see why it was January 18th? That would have been the number of milliseconds since the number we gave it, that was the number of milliseconds between January 1st and January 18th of 1970, which is not that many when you, or the number of seconds, or no, I guess we took seconds and treated them like milliseconds, and so that's why it only had a very short time frame there. Oh yeah, look. This is implemented as moment. Internally, they just do what I did anyways. So this is going to be totally up to you which approach you take. All right. So we get back to this. I think we're printing out the date all right. And so what we need to do now is also print out, let's say, I forget. I think it was the low and high temperature for that day. So in my output here, I have temperature high, I have temperature low. Here it is. I have temperature high and I have temperature low. So that's what I'm going to use. I'll use temperature low. And I got to do some of this gross string concatenation, right? To add these strings together. Because tomorrow afternoon we learn a better way. Can I just use it now? Okay. It's a little bit nicer for me to use something like this, which allows me to, with these different ticks, these different backticks. So normally we can create strings with a single quote or with a double quote. Third option with ES6 is this backticks. They're called template literals, and they allow us to take a variable. So that's me. My name is, I can interpolate this into the string. Alternatively, what we would have done before is my name is, right? And it's like, that's not much different, but it does become different when you have to start to add quotes around things, and when you have more text that comes afterwards. Now it's become, and then you have another thing that you need to concatenate in there, and then it becomes a lot easier. So I'm just going to use these backticks, and tomorrow afternoon is when that's officially part of the lecture and the curriculum. Okay. So here what I want to do is take the date that's generated, and I want to add a couple of tabs just to put some space between the date and my low temperature. So here I'm going to say day.temperature low. Okay. I've got them in, it looks like it's degrees Celsius, I think, right? Yeah. And the reason why that is because I actually made that decision over here. If I don't pass this parameter, then we get it in Fahrenheit. But because I've passed a query string that says I want Canadian units, that's why the API is returning those temperatures to me in the right unit. And I can see here, unit, that there are other options. CA is the same as SI, except when that wind speed and wind gusts are in kilometers per hour. US gets imperial, that's the default, right? So, excuse me, it's their documentation that helps me understand what's possible here. Because if I didn't read this, maybe what I would do is I'd get the Fahrenheit version, and then I would go get a library that converts, or I would write the logic to do the conversion. And you have to, I mean, Fahrenheit never makes sense anyways, so you kind of have to go and look up how you actually do. I think it's, I don't know, you divide by 9 and times it by 5. So there's something in there you can do. But the point is, I don't want to have to think about that. I like that the API does it for me. And it just took a little bit more understanding of the interface to call this API in order to get some of this this. And I can also, it looks like, pass in a language, and it would give me back summaries in those language. So that's even nicer. I don't have to do any of that translation, right? This might be worth paying for if I had a site that needed to do this, because all that extra cost of doing the translations myself could become quite expensive. So keep that in mind. It's just showing you that you have to read the docs sometimes. So here's temperature low. What I want to do is math.round that, because I don't want my decimals. And then after it, I want to put a little, I don't know, what is it? The degree symbol. And the way I usually do this is I just find it somewhere online, and I just copy and paste it. And so now I've added a little degree symbol there, and I should have 12 degrees, 13 degrees, etc. Right? So I want that to be from the low temperature to the high temperature. And then I need that little icon to show on the end of it. And the way that I did that was through this day.icon. So day.icon, it's telling me that each of these days is a partly cloudy day. So if I take this partly cloudy day and I do a lookup, what I should get back is this little cloud symbol. So I'll take weather, and I'll do a lookup on weather using the day icon value. And so instead of partly cloudy, we do the lookup, we get the emoji instead. So that is, I think that's it for this one. Yep. This kind of shows a little bit of a cleaner example here, where get weather, you pass the day in, it does that moment date thing here. Yeah, this syntax is basically saying if this is undefined, then use an empty string instead, just so that we don't get undefined back, because it would print undefined if we got, for some reason, the API added a new type of weather. Maybe with the ever-changing climate, it's possible that we get this, like, I don't know, deadly hail or something like that. And so deadly-hail is this new thing. But we don't have deadly hail in this list. So what this is doing is just saying, well, we didn't find it, so we'll just put an empty string there instead, right? Maybe you put like a little question mark, or whatever you want instead. I'm doing the rounding here as well. And so then when I make this call to get weather, it gives me back 4 values inside of there that I can just use, and then I don't get this super long, ugly string that we have to kind of read through, right? So that's kind of why that's different. I would say definitely look at this example here. If you do want to go over any of the stuff that we went over this afternoon, the video is available for you in the channel. When I hit stop, it should stop recording. It should archive, so you should be able to watch it almost immediately after that. Are there any questions? Okay. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next week.